In this lesson, we'll talk about the process of remeshing. So in ZBrush, the process of remeshing is basically the combining of different pieces into a single new remeshed piece of geometry. So for instance, if we start to append different subtools to this, we'll go ahead and let's append a cube, and let's append a cone. Let's just add a few more shapes here. Maybe add another sphere. Okay, and we can start to move these around. So coming in here and kind of moving that up here. Let's take our cone and kind of move it up like that. And then we can take our other sphere and maybe move it down here. So we've got all of these separate subtools. So let's say that we want to now create a mesh that is kind of a combination of all of these different subtools. So what we can do is go down to Remesh underneath the in the subtool subpalette here. Go down to Remesh. There's an option for symmetry. You can go symmetry in the X, Y, and Z. So we can choose that or choose to turn it off. There's also a resolution slider. We're going to actually be creating a new mesh, so you can change the resolution of that mesh. And there's also a polish setting here, and also a setting here for creating polygroups. Okay, so here you can say we'll create a new polygroup for the new skin where the tools intersect. So let's go ahead and just hit remesh all and see what happens. So we'll do remesh all. It's going to work with the visible subtools. And now you can see at the end of this list, we've got a new mesh that's been appended here. It's really high resolution, but it includes all of those meshes into one seamless object. Okay, you could now come in here if you wanted to and start smoothing this out and sculpting or doing whatever you want, turn it into a Dynamesh. The key is it's taken the shapes of all of these, combined those into a new mesh that is appended onto the end. Now, it's created sort of a union of all these, so everything's kind of additive because on all of these we have this first icon selected. Let's delete this remeshed subtool, and this time we'll take the cube, and let's say that we want the cube, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of smooth it out a little bit. Let's say that we want to have the cube be additive, okay, and then we want to start to add maybe this sphere, but then we want to subtract this one, so we'll choose the second option here, and same thing with the cone. Let's see. So now let's see what happens. So we've got two additive, two subtractive. Let's do a remesh once again. So we'll remesh all. Let that calculate. We'll go ahead and select that. And if we go ahead and solo that, you can see that we've combined two of these, and then we've subtracted the sphere, and we've also subtracted the cone. So think of that as kind of a Boolean operation. Now it's fairly rough. You could come in here and increase your resolution and do it again and see what happens here. So let that think for a second. And so now we get something that's a little bit sharper. This is basically just remeshing, creating a new mesh that contains all of the different pieces. Okay, so that's one way to combine different objects, is to sort of remesh them into a single object. And in a couple, I think in the next lesson, we'll talk about projecting the detail through into the new object that we've remeshed. There's another option for remeshing, and that's the Q remesher. And what that is basically just taking the geometry that you have and being able to create a clean layout. So for instance, if we take this guy that we created here, and maybe we subdivide it a few times, and let's go ahead and delete lower. We can go into the Q remesher right here, and this will allow us to remesh the object in a different way. So we could say, okay, I want to set the target polygon count. I only want to have 10,000 polygons, so I can input that here. Or I can say I want to have half the number of polygons, or the same number. And then we can use Q remesher, and it'll go through, look at the mesh that you've got, and remesh the object in a kind of a cleaner layout. You also have the ability to, well, let's go ahead and just look at this here. So it sort of remeshed this into a nice clean layout. And you can see that there's not really any attention paid to the roundness of the mouth or anything like that. So, what you can do, and this actually has done it on the mesh itself, so it hasn't created a new mesh. So what we can do is also say, okay, I want to kind of guide it a little bit. So let's use QRemesher guides. I'm just going to come in and draw a guide around the side here. Okay, so I want to have the geometry flowing kind of in that direction. It's not an exact match, but we'll go in now, and we want to choose QRemesher right here, and we want to dial this curve stiffness up a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and dial that up, and then we'll run QRemesher. It's going to shoot for that target polygon count, remesh it, and it's going to try to follow along a little bit with the guides that we've created and not be just straight across. So you'll see that the geometry actually flows a little bit more along this direction, which is what we want, and it's been able to remesh this together. So you can use this for kind of cleaning up topology that you've created, so that you can then reproject detail through it. As far as the actual remesh, that you can use to combine different subtools together into a single mesh, and you can choose whether to create a union or a subtraction or an intersection with those kind of Boolean type operations. Okay, but the idea is that you're creating a new mesh, and a lot of these options in ZBrush, when you're kind of creating UVs and you're reprojecting detail into a new mesh that has new topology, it's going to be sort of a remesh and projection type of workflow. Well, this is the first part of it, the remeshing. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at projecting detail into meshes. So that'll make more sense as we go through that. So we'll talk about that next.